Business leaders and intellectual business community, we continue our discussions in this third segment of the topic how business schools lost their way. And the importance of this topic is that we can see that the dissatisfactions of the MBA graduates of the from the CEOs of companies or from the company's demand is directed to the problems in the way how business schools manage their approach to be given to the MBA students during their course in the school. And we have talked about some reasons. One is about the professors that are not practitioners, and more and more getting academicians to become the professors in the business schools. One of the reason of why it happens also because the reward system of the business schools, they rewards more to the doctorate degrees, to the research degrees, rather than practitioners degree or professionals qualifications. It means that professional in the real business. So now we're talking about the content or the approach that the business schools is giving to the MBA students. Still with us, Professor Datuk Zabid Haji Abdul Rashid from Malaysia. He is the President and Vice Chancellor of University Tun Abdul Razak. Datuk, so now we talk about the content of the MBA school or the MBA course. We have talked a little bit about the case studies that you mentioned, that the students going to Carrefour to help them to solve their real problem in business. And we see also in some business schools, they teach the case method to some degree. Some are using not too many, some are using quite a lot of case studies to be discussed with the students. And still this imposes a problem as well if the case studies is taught by the professors who has never yet really knows what is real business problem. But we have already covered that in the first segment. And the second problem of these case studies is also that the case depicted in the case studies who are supplied by, let's say, the Harvard Business Schools or supplied by the Wharton, by many suppliers of business cases. First, you know, case is very contextual. It happens contextually to the countries where it happens. Second, the case has happened maybe a few years ago, or 10 years ago, or 20 years ago. They're still being used for the case study for the students, so it's not current. While we know that in the business world, everything changing very fast now, so what is applied 5 years ago may not be applied anymore in this current period of time. And also in this article also mentioned that this while in the business schools they teach more on the problem solving, that they seldom or very few touching about the ethics, way of conduct that is acceptable by the business world, or what is expected by the business society and the overall society about their behaviors. But they are trained mostly on the logical sides. So Datuk, how do you see these problems really happens also in Malaysia?
Yes, I think when we talk about teaching cases in business school, many of them use cases of what has happened. Some maybe 1 or 2 years, others even longer.
Right.
Now, I like to mention that in trying to learn about cases, there is actually ground for business school academics and also the students on the learning curve, because when you look at cases, what is the role of the professor is more of facilitating the groups in the class in the discussion. The professor is not providing solution. The professor should be facilitating the group to guide them so that they will find creative solutions. So that should be the role of a professor in managing conducting case studies in business schools.
Right.
Now, what is also important, and I think very much lacking in many business schools when they teach cases, is the learning curve. In other words, when you learn about the case of an organization, you learn about a problem that happens in a particular point of time in a particular context. But then, in trying to find a solution, a lot of students do not see the learning curve, in the sense that what you learn in another context, how do you apply it in a different context at a different point of time. So this is something like, I have mentioned to you earlier that our parents taught us to eat in our certain ways. For example, the Chinese will teach their children to eat by using the chopsticks. The Westerners will teach their children to eat by using knife and fork.
Right.
But not many Asian families teach their children to use the natural fork and spoon. But somehow we learn, as we grow older, we learn that when you are eating Chinese food, chopstick is the best way to eat, and when you are in Europe or you are in North America, you might be using the fork and the knife. So this is because we understand the learning curve of our parents when they nurture us as we grow. The same analogy that you go to business school is whether the students in participating the business programs, whether they got a higher level of learning curve. Now another point is whether to what extent the professors are giving or providing innovative ways in teaching the students. So this is also another challenge, whether the professors are academics or people from industry. So this is also another challenge on what we can say, trying to improve the pedagogy, the teaching, and also the learning experiences. And I believe that when you talk about university curriculum in particular, one of those things that many people have criticized heavily is that business school teach about logics, business school teach about the soft skills, but they often ignore, or they did not emphasize the issue of values, like what you say, morality, ethics, about what business ethics, what is right and what is wrong. So this is something where many business schools will have to learn on how to adopt to this kind of values. Now we in Malaysia or Indonesia, values are very important, because Indonesia is very much, I would say, more homogeneous, whereas Malaysia is more heterogeneous. You have the Bumiputras, you have the Chinese origin, we have the Indians and other ethnic groups, and because of this diversity of the community, it is a real challenge that we must understand the values of the Bumiputras, the values of the Chinese, the values of the Indians in the business context, and to know that those values, how it will not be offensive to one community or to the other. For example, I was teaching business ethics in my university, and what I have found is that it's not easy. For example, in an Asian context, hiring relatives is acceptable because you are not trying to do anything unusual, because you are trying to help your community. But you try and talk this to a European, right? And the Europeans will be saying, why are you practicing nepotism? So therefore, what kind of values do we want to teach our business graduates? So these are the things that actually becomes a challenge in business schools. Now American business schools have American values, and Indonesia, I guess, will have to adopt its own values, just like in Malaysia and in Europe. So I believe this issue of ethics is very important, and we need to reinforce in our teaching and learning.
And more importantly, I think ethics is not taught as something something that a normative that is written on the book, but more on the reality they face in the field, you know. So because I think quite many business schools also in Indonesia having a class of business ethics, but inside that class of business ethics, the professors teaching them this should be done, this should not be done, but you know, in the reality there is no clear line between those things that is written in the textbooks. So in the reality there are a lot of gray area. That means that the students should be equipped with more on the equipments on how to, you know, how to see whether this gray is more on the white side or more on the black side, and what is the guidance to make decisions on that particular ethical problems. And one thing more, Datuk, Zabid, we see also from case studies that the case studies supplied for the students are quite complete in data, so that they can analyze all the data that is provided by the researchers who prepared the case studies. But in the reality, most of the times they don't have such a complete data. So I think it is also a problem that makes the graduates of MBA schools expect to get more data before they make decisions, rather than they take whatever data available and then make realistic decisions that is needed by the real business, that you need to make decisions quite fast. So Datuk, I think we have to have another break again. So business leaders and intellectual business community, we have to have another break before we come to the last segment of our discussions. For you who wants to participate, please SMS 0896 times 788. We go for the last segment.